Okay.
Alright, let's see here. Fuzzy dice, check. Whack-a-con,
What's going on, everyone? Welcome to another fantastic Tuesday here on the Exploding Dice channel. Oh man, I turned that all the way off. I don't want to have that music gone. Welcome to another episode of Fuzzy Dice, your Dungeon Master show here on the Exploding Dice channel. As always, I've got a fantastic show for you guys lined up. You can see right on this side of me, I got Mr. Greg Tito. He's going to be hanging out with us. How's it going, my friend?
Hi. Pretty good. Doing well. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, no problem. And thank you for being here. So before we dive into some stuff, we just got a few little quick announcements. I'm gonna put on some music in the background. So what are we talking about today?
Gonna dance.
What's up? Oh yeah, my theme
I told
song.
you we were gonna dance.
My theme song is one of my favorite bands called Optimus Rhyme. They have a song called Fuzzy Dice, and
Nice.
I use it because it's great. No, so we're gonna be talking about a lot of things today. We've got all kinds of stuff on the docket. But first, I want to go over some announcements. As always, if you guys have not checked it out, our most recent episode of Jade Regent just went up on the YouTube channel, so I will be throwing a link to that pretty soon. We had a special guest hanging out with us for that episode. He stopped by in place of our illustrious sorceress, and he will be hopefully sticking around for at least another episode or two. We'll see. And keep an eye peeled for more guests coming in the future, because we have a lot of stuff planned for you for that. And also, if you guys could see, not on that side of me, on this side of me, there's a big banner that says, that is telling you about a giveaway that we were going to be doing. I mentioned this on the show, the D&D stream. All the winners for the 1K one-shot giveaway have been selected. They have been contacted, and that game will hopefully be happening on October 1st. So if you want to come hang out with us and all of those winners of our big one-shot giveaway, it's going to be a great game. I have some great stuff planned for them. As always, you can see the schedule of where I will be appearing in games and stuff right down in the corner there. Jade Regent on Sundays, and then some other games on Encounter Roleplay, which coming up this week. And also, I hear Encounter Roleplay has a 24-hour stream, which I may be appearing on. So yeah, details about that in the future. So let's dive right into it. Greg, there's some information about you down below. I just want to make sure, I want to ask you, because I want to make sure that you can kind of confirm all this information to see if you get it right.
Sure.
Yeah. So tell us about yourself.
Okay.
We're seeing if you get the right answer.
The Twitch channel to make sure. Yeah. Now I'm like, all right. Now I gotta go check out Twitch. Because I can't see. I was just looking at the Skype thing. But
No,
I will say that I am. What do you want to know? How far back in the Wayback Machine do you want to travel?
I mean, well, I guess we could start when you kind of first took your first breath, and then go from there.
All right, so I was in Syracuse, New York. I was born.
And if you went to school there.
No way, really? Yeah. I was there for 3 months, and then my family moved to Connecticut. So I don't know anything about living in Syracuse, although I know. I did spend some time in Ithaca, New York, which was not really the same thing, because there's got like the whole Cornell and Ithaca College vibe there instead of the. Apparently now Syracuse is a very depressed area with all the factories have closed down and all that. But I moved to Connecticut and lived there for 18, 20 years, all through school in a small beach town on the southeastern shore, Long Island Sound. It was a very stinky stretch of water, but I have fond memories of living near the beach, and I moved to New York City after college, got married, and wanted to write about games, so I started doing some freelance writing, as well as some writing for tabletop companies like Goodman Games, and I got one article in, I believe it was Dragon. I think it was in the digital incarnation of Dragon, right as I got hired to write about video games full time in North Carolina. So I moved down to North Carolina in 2009. Was there for 5 years, worked my way up at a place called The Escapist until I was the editor-in-chief there. And then about a year and a half ago, I was laid off and offered this job at Dungeons & Dragons, coincidentally in like a 2-week period. So it was really stressful, but it ended up being awesome. And I got here, and Seattle has been amazing. One of my dreams was to work for Dungeons & Dragons back in the day. And so it's... After all the stress of moving a family and a wife across the country and relocating in a new place, a couple months of just learning the ropes here in Wizards of the Coast offices, I said to myself, "Oh wait, I'm doing what I want to do. That's crazy. How did that happen?" And then I've been just kind of running and making sure everything works on the communications tip here at Wizards of the Coast for Dungeons and Dragons. So. For those of you who don't know, I do like PR as well as doing some marketing. Help out with social and stuff like that. My colleague Trevor Kidd usually handles most of that, but I also help out and do some random social media initiatives. I don't know if you guys have been following on the official Wizards account. There's Harshnag the Grim is a bot that's running right now, and if you retweet that Twitter account, you'll get a random unique adventurer with custom art made by Richard Witters here on the art team. He's a concept illustrator and as well as part of the deep dive on the story team. And I was like, "Hey, Richard, we need 200 drawings of D&D characters." He's like, "Oh, okay." And then he's like, "I figured out I can do one drawing every 10 minutes. And I'm like, "All right, cool. That should be plenty of time." So he whipped out a whole bunch of awesome drawings, and we put it together in this bot, and that was totally my initiative there, getting that thing out there.
So that's
kind of the stuff.
A long time ago, I worked when I got out of college. I did concept art for some small video game companies, and that was essentially what it was like. It's like, hey, we need 200 drawings of helmets by closing time today. That's how
it all out there.
That's how the art business works. Which is why I tell everyone, don't do that. No, don't go into it. It's the most stressful. So, but speaking of that,
it can be.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
No.
I was gonna say, speaking of the bot, which I actually was considering it, but I didn't actually use it to make the character that I'm playing in Storm King's Thunder. I used a different thing to make that. But that kind of thing, you guys, you guys have just rolled out a brand new campaign, actually in a season of what seems like a lot of new books coming out from Wizards.
We rolled out Storm King's Thunder, which is our massive epic storyline with the different types of giants that have been a part of Dungeons & Dragons from the beginning. The old Against the Giants were some of the first modules or adventures printed by TSR, the first company that made Dungeons & Dragons under Gary Gygax, and they were written actually by Gary Gygax. So these different giant types were outlined there. And we have taken the seeds of those stories and that lore and spun it into a new tale about what would happen if those giants, or the caste system of those giants, was rent asunder, and they all of a sudden had to prove themselves to their giant gods. And many of them thinking that proving themselves means, that all of the small folk, all the humans, elves, dwarves, gnomes, goblins, anybody, it doesn't matter, they are inconsequential to their goals. And so the adventurers, who usually are those small folk, have to band together to try to figure out why exactly these giants are doing what they're doing and how to stop them. So yeah, that's our big epic storyline that is coming out now. And then we also have Folo's Guide to Monsters, which I'm particularly excited about because it's kind of like a story-based way to introduce the lore behind specific monster types that are also very integral to the D&D experience. So like mind flayers and goblinoids and Yuan-Ti and all of these beholders, all these things that have like such great iconic imagery. This book really goes deep into their societies and how they work, kind of doesn't necessarily retcon, but definitely refines the lore that had come before and makes it more updated for 5th edition. So it has lots of great story lore background, as well as a bunch of new monsters that you can use in your game, and player races. So being able to play as a goblin or yuan-ti, we finally have expanded some of those more monstrous races in Volo's Guide.
Yeah, I'm
really...
But
my favorite part about it is that it is Volo. I was trying to just get this in before you mentioned it, but it's Volo who is writing this. It was Volo Thamp Geddard, and he is a character that was used by Ed Greenwood, the Father of the Realms, as a kind of foil to his other character, Elminster, the Sage of Shadowdale, and the two of them have a contentious relationship. And one of the Elminster, who is, definitely has a more storied, epic career, doesn't think that everything that Volo is saying is quite truthful. And so the through line throughout the book is that Volo is writing this guide, and then Elminster is writing little bits in the margins about that's not actually quite true, and here's where you're wrong, and this is why you shouldn't trust Volo. I think that's pretty interesting as to get muddled all those things into a whole bunch of fun monsters that you can use with your game.
Yeah, no, I'm really interested in probably picking up I actually just got my copy of Storm King's Thunder recently. I've cracked it a little bit, but I haven't delved into it because I'm actually playing in a campaign on it, and I don't want to ruin Will's story by picking it apart, because as some people in my some people who watch my show may know, I have a habit of I'm actually sort of an avid collector of modules and published adventures and stuff, mostly because I'm not a great writer, so that's where I get a lot of my writing process from, is taking these things and sort of picking them apart, putting them back together, editing, changing things around, mostly adding content to them. And so, I don't know how long we're going to be playing this round of Storm King's Thunder, but when we do, I'm probably going to rip the whole thing apart and put it back together and, put my own kind of twist on it. And then find a place where I can write it up and, put it up for people to use, as I've done with quite a few Paizo adventure paths already. And I'm probably going to get around to doing Curse of Strahd at some point. But yeah, I'm really interested because I've had all these kind of giant maps, maps for from what was that old module, Against the Fire Giants, I think, which I still had.
Against the Giants and the fire halls of the Fire Giant King, which is one part of the whole Against the Giants thing.
Yeah, it's I've had those kind of sitting on my shelf for a long time, and I've never really had an excuse to kind of break those modules and maps and kind of stuff out. And so when I get around to it, I will probably end up doing a mashup of all that stuff, just fitting it all in.
That's cool. Yeah, I like that. I like that the trend for Chris Perkins recently, and he's the one who's written the last two adventures, but also contributed a lot more to the adventures in 5th edition that came before that. But he seems to be the master at taking stuff that feels nostalgic about Dungeons and Dragons and infusing new stories and new life with them. So, a lot of people, when we did Princes of the Apocalypse, they were like, oh, this is just an Elemental Evil or Temple of the Elemental Evil retread. And yes, it was inspired by Elemental Evil, but it's a totally new and different story. And same with Curse of Strahd and I think Storm King's Thunder, is that, they take these parts of D&D lore and expand upon them and tell new and wondrous stories. And so, yeah, I'm excited about that. And I think I totally encourage people to go back and reread the old modules and the old lore and find ways to filter that in that, Chris may have wanted to, but couldn't because of page count or, just wanted to infuse all that in there, because that's exactly what he's doing.
Well, that's what I tell people all the time when I'm talking about modules specifically, and I discuss them a lot. People will tell me, oh, there's this and there's this that don't really work or aren't really written well. I liked Out of the Abyss. I had such a problem with its formatting. It was the weirdest thing I've ever read formatting wise. Just because all the pieces were in different.
Oh, really?
Yeah. it's like just I was reading it and I got to the chapter on Gracklstew, and it's like all the pieces that you needed were in different chapters, and I'm like, oh, I've got to read through this whole thing and piece it back together. And so what's going on, Sydney? No, but so what I tell people all the time is like you kind of have to forgive modules and campaigns a little bit, because like you said, they are restricted by page count. Like they can't publish all of the content that probably needs to be published to give them the best possible experience, which is why as a DM you should never run an adventure or a module without sitting down and reading the whole thing cover to cover first, because you know that way
Yes, I would agree. I would totally agree, and I think that's where because I ran Out of the Abyss, or at least the first half of it, for a stream last fall. So we did about 14 sessions, I think, in general. And I get what you're saying, in that like it's very hard to like just read, a section of that book and run it. Mm-hmm. If you're just reading one section and then that's it. You do need a little bit of I don't think you even need a detailed, comprehensive knowledge of all of the adventure, but you need to know the kind of beats to hit upon. So that's what I would say, was like, yeah, you do get those things. And I think we listened to people and had personal experience in dealing with those adventures in the way that they're presented. And so in Storm King's Thunder, I don't know if you've noticed, but in the beginning of the book, we have a Dramatis Personae, as well as the adventure flowchart. So, I mean, it's a little bit more of a linear progression a bit, even though it is very sandboxy at certain points. In Storm King's Thunder, I mean, there is definitely hey, here's where the adventure writer expects levels of the player characters to be at certain points. Obviously, a DM can fiddle with that and make adjustments on the fly, but we recognize that it's sometimes hard to digest a 256-page adventure and then run it as if you had complete knowledge of all 256 pages at once. Yeah. So we try to give as many guides and helpful notes as possible. And I think that even I come from a theater background too. So that Dramatis Personae in the beginning, and I'm probably saying that wrong, but that's how I've always said it. I just love that, because it feels like, oh, here's this cast of characters, and you're going to have them weave in and out, and you understand where they are, and it's always a good reference point to be like, who's this guy, or who's this person, who's this woman, why is she doing what she's doing, and it's a quick reminder. And I think we're going to make improvements to that going forward, to make those adventures as easy to run as possible at the table.
Yeah, the Out of the Abyss, one of the things I thought was great, but was also sort of a killer, was at the beginning when it outlined like what was happening in Valkenvelve, and it's like, here are the 12 NPCs that you need to, that are in the cell with the players, and here's all their personalities. When you get to session 1, like, I hope you know all of these characters well enough to differentiate them and stuff like that. And it's like, as a new DM, it was like, oh man, there's a lot of and they were all like, they all had their own contentions, they all had their own desires and kind of affiliations, how they react to different people and places. And it's like, I could easily see a new DM, because I felt a little bit overwhelmed there. Like, I could see a new DM just being buried under that, that much NPC information, being like, oh my god, how do I run all this stuff? And you're right, the flowchart in Storm King's Thunder is a great help. I'm always reminded, whenever I think this is probably where it stems from. There's a Paizo adventure, Rise of the Runelords, where in the first chapter they give you this encounter that introduces this NPC, right? And the blurb just says, like, this NPC he latches onto the party, he's affectionate, he has a hero comp, like he thinks they're really cool, he may even flirt with one of the players, right? And so you're like, okay, you're reading this and you're like, that's how I'll play this character. And then literally the next chapter, like, that's book 1. When you get to book 2, they're like, oh, by the way, this guy is a drug addict and also a murderer, and he literally just came from his old haunted house before arriving in town in book 1, and before the part, like 10 minutes before the party meets him. And I'm like, probably would have been information that would have been good to have the first time around. And that's
yeah. Totally.
And that's kind of like that's where I come from as a as you know, reading adventures. It's like I don't want the adventure to pull something like that on me. Like I don't want to be caught in a weird situation where like, wow, if I had known that, I would have played this section totally differently. It looks like we may be having a little bit of a
and I
issue.
think the way, yeah, yeah, well, Skype is Skype, but the way I handled the NPCs in Out of the Abyss, because I felt the same way. I was a little bit like, oh geez, how am I gonna run all these people, and you know, not even to think about like performance. I was just like, yeah, you're right. Like, how am I gonna juggle all of their character details in my head? And the way that I did it was, I spent a little bit of time in prep, and I had these color-coded index cards, and I just wrote all of their character information on there. Started with, you know, their stats and abilities and all that. But what it did is at the table, it gave me a visual and tactile reminder of who they are, even though I didn't have all those details written down, like, you know, as far as their how they would act or whatever. But the fact that I didn't forget any of them because they were arrayed, you know, behind my screen behind there, and I'd be like, and you know, Grant said this, and then I'd like, oh, look, oh, there's that dwarf shield maiden. Okay, well, she says this, and just having those visual cues really helped balance and keep all of them so that they didn't get lost in the shuffle. Now, I mean, the party, I don't know if you know how your party reacted, but my party kind of latched on to one or two of them as NPCs that they wanted to continue with or have, you know, more of a future with. And so that was that problem of having 12 NPCs quickly became like 2 NPCs.
Yeah.
And that even, I don't know, my party just at one point, I was like, all of your friends are going that way when, spoiler alert, Demogorgon rises. Do you want to go save them? Are you sure? And they're like, no, we're good. And I was like, okay, well, great. You know, it's like after session like 5 or 6, they kind of just abandoned all those NPCs and went on their own and did their own thing. So, you know, parties will find their way, and it's up to the DM just to figure out that they're giving them at least the best idea of what's happening with these NPCs and make them kind of make their own choices. But, you know, that's part of the fun.
Yeah, it's that's kind of what my central thesis about campaigns is like. I think they work like that's why I like the formatting of Storm King's Thunder a lot better than I did like the previous ones, because not only are the things organized a lot more easily to reference, but also you've got that flow chart and you've got those tools that, so like when a DM goes back and plays editor like they should be doing, like they should be editing it for the way they intend to run the campaign. You know, if it's formatted more easily, like it's, and Juan Chewy was, you know, he's saying like he like, you know, Storm King's Thunder was presented very linearly, but when you start, which, you know, for a new DM, and I know I've been talking to him on Twitter, like he was like, okay, how do I, you know, I want to kind of make this last a little longer. It's like level, I think Storm King's Thunder is level like 1 to 10, something like that.
Yeah, I think that's what they ended up with. Yeah,
which is actually kind of on the shorter end of some campaigns, or at least some pre-written campaigns. And so I said, you know, I was telling him, well, then that's where you go and you say, okay, what can I add to this? Where can I flesh out things that I feel need more development as a DM? And that's, you know, that's what I think that's the DM's job. But I do agree with what Shadzar was saying, which is like, you know, yes, you're right that adventures are just sort of ready to play, so a DM doesn't have to kind of make everything from scratch. If you want to use them that way, again, I'm horrible at homebrewing, so I use them as a basis to work from, and then construct a grand campaign sort of around that. Usually keeping the story elements if I think they work really well, but you know, because that's just how the way I fall into doing it. Like I'm not great at just sitting down and homebrewing a world from scratch. It's never come naturally to me.
I think I wanted to be that person. I don't know, maybe it's just a lifetime fanhood of J.R.R. Tolkien, in that you want to, part of what drew me to The Lord of the Rings was that there was these languages, and there were all these appendices and you know indexes and things that seemed so in depth, that the world felt real because of it. And when I approached making my Dungeons and Dragons campaigns, I thought of it the same way, where it was like, I need each, deity to have its specific, ups and downs, and each culture I needed to flesh that all out even before we got to the table. And part of growing up as a dungeon master, as well as being in contact with some of the awesome dungeon masters here at Wizards of the Coast, is that you can over prepare, or you can make yourself feel too flustered by not knowing the right thing to do, when the right thing to do is to take cues from your players and give them the best adventure at the table at that moment, and stay in the moment. Because if you're focused too much on prep, some people will prep for 6, 8, 10 hours before a 2-hour game session, and if they love it and they don't feel any stress from that, I feel like that's great. But if it is a stressor, if that is making you resent your party for not going the way that you wanted them to go because you spent 8 hours developing this island nation that they decided to pass by, then that's not going to end up with a good play experience. It's more important about crafting the good play experience.
We've seen it. We've all seen it too many times.
Chris Perkins told this great story. When I first got here, he was doing a talk about dungeon mastering, to illustrate that point, he basically said, I created this island. It was like a seafaring campaign. He's like, I created this island, and it had its own different factions were under control and all these things, and the party just went that way. Yeah. And he's like, eventually, 2 years later in playtime, they eventually went back to all of that stuff that he had prepped, but he's like, that's prep that's not useful. Find out what you need at the table and work with that. And I think that's some of the best advice, and it's actually made me really enjoy dungeon mastering way more.
I think it was Will in Counter Roleplay who told me, I think it was him I heard this from. If not, I'm gonna credit him anyway because that seems to make sense. He told me a thing.
Good job, Will.
Yeah, he told me he had a quote which said, like, I think it was him. Anything like if your prep takes 4 hours, to prep for a session, then your goal as a DM should be to get it so you can prep for 2 hours, but get the same amount done. And then you can hopefully, then you can work so you can prep for 1 hour and still get the same amount done. And that's kind of, I think it resonated with me. It was certainly a good idea, because it's like, as DMs, the less time you're spending kind of hashing out the things that are going to happen in the world around you, the more times you have to spend on other things, like maybe focusing on what you can do to increase player enjoyment at the table. Can I spend that time fleshing out a player's backstory, or creating a fun event for them, or what can you have other things or you could just spend that time sleeping, I guess.
Yeah, and I mean, if we're talking about a written adventure too, I mean, maybe I'm blessed, I think, with a little bit of like really high reading comprehension, so I can read something once and kind of get most of the gist of it. But that's what I often find is the best prep for me, if I'm playing, a published adventure, is just reading it and then rereading and then rereading it, so that it doesn't become, where's my notes? Where's the thing that I've, put down, or I got to find the right thing at the table. It's just, you're accessing it from your memory. And in that way, the fun becomes, how do I improvise on this? How do I take all that information that I know is happening in this story and twist it based on what my players are doing, and it really frees you up in that way. I think you're right there too. It's like the focus should be on what's happening at the table, not on what you're prepping. And a lot of dungeon masters fall into that trap of this is what I want, and this is how I'm going to end up making the story happen. And it's way more fun when it's this shared theater of the mind storytelling idea.
I don't want to dwell on a published adventures too much, because obviously it's a topic I can talk about for a very long time. I know, like I said, aside from
one thing before we move on,
go for it.
Can I ask you actually something? because you were mentioning like, oh, it was hard to kind of digest some of the stuff, and I think Storm King's Thunder makes great strides in adding like the dramatis personae and those things. But those are only 2 parts. I was wondering if there's other stuff that you think would find useful in a published adventure that would make it more easily digestible, and make more. Is it better visual guides like the flow chart, or is it more things that that are cutouts that you can use at the table? Like, what is it that you think would a book like that should provide?
So the way I tend to run my adventures, and the way I tend to take an adventure from like a published module, like for example, I'm running right now. I'm running Jade Regent, which is a published Pathfinder adventure, and so obviously my first step is to go through it, and what I really I really like when bits of things are kind of broken down in a way that that explains it very, very easily, like what's going to be done at the table. So like when there's a building that the players are going to go with, like sometimes it'll break those down into room by room, and that's pretty standard. I like generally a little blurb about what's going on in that room, like what the players will see, who's going to be there, and maybe like maybe a schedule. I also like again, it's hard to pinpoint something exactly, but let me open real quick. Let me open on the side if my computer would. I opened a folder and my computer decided to lag. I'm gonna open one of the adventures I'm running now, and I'm gonna go see if I can pinpoint exactly why I like the way it's run.
Sure.
Written. So looking at the first chapter, like it's got a backstory, and then it's got like these little sort of vignettes, and they're well detailed. The enemies are all there, and it just kind of like everything has a section on creatures, and it says what the creatures are here and how they behave, like how they react, how they prep this and that, and then it's kind of broken down into which way, how events can go. I tend to digest this pretty much the same as anyone else does. The only thing I think I do differently is when I sit down to make my maps, I will tend to look at I'll tend to look at these things, and I don't use them exactly from the book. I will kind of, as I'm making my maps, I'm reading what's going on in each room, because I'm putting the furniture and stuff in there. And just because the process takes so long, by the time I'm done, like, I know every single room of this building, like, backwards and forwards, and also in my head I'm thinking, okay, the enemies live here, so this is how they live, because this guy's room is messy, or this is the dining room, and there's armor in the corner. Like, it's just the little details that you internalize as you're kind of setting those things up. And for me, that helps a lot, like, because by the time I actually get to the session, I know the whole layout. I've seen it so many times that I know it front and back. The only thing I think that is, again, I can't really go through. I don't have time to go through all the all the adventures I've read, like Out of the Abyss, this and that, and point them out exactly. But I know some of these have little sidebars which will often tell you, like, okay, what I'm remembering one in particular. It's at the end of Crimson Throne, where there's an event that happens. Right? And the event happens presuming that the players didn't, like, it's written in the book presuming the players didn't do something that like, there was an NPC that they were actually tasked with saving, but the event is written as if they didn't save that NPC, because that's just the way it's written in the book. There's a little sidebar that says, wait a second, didn't we save this person? And then it tells you, like, okay, this is what happened. If, for example, the players did go, like, what they were supposed to do, then this is how the event plays out. And it doesn't necessarily have to be something that specific, but it's like, I generally, I think a lot of DMs will kind of come to those situations where it's like, okay, so the book's telling me one thing, but, like, this guy is already dead. What should I do? What can I consider doing? I was actually a big fan. I don't know if the Storm King's Thunder and stuff have done this, or Out of the Abyss, or Curse of Strahd. But if you remember way back, in, like, the old 3.5 modules that Wizards was putting out, they used to have a foreword that would tell you, like, these are the movies that you can watch to get and like this is the music that you can listen to get inspiration for this adventure, right? And I thought those were, I mean,
that is cool.
I don't know how many people use them. I just thought those were really cool little details. Like,
that is really cool. I have a buddy who only plays Netrunner, listening to specific electronic dance music. You know, because he's like, oh, we're totally in the Matrix, and we're doing Netrunner type things and stuff like that. So, yeah, I love that. I love that idea where you know, music or movies can provide the right ambience or context to it. Yeah, but those are good points, and I think those sidebars can only do so much because there's. I mean, you've known many players who can, you know, there's a few branching paths where you're like, you know, save this person, didn't save this person, or kill this dragon, or didn't kill this dragon. But, you know, players are astute at finding ways to screw that up as much as possible. And so there's so many corner cases that you can't write a little blurb about each one of them. But I love that we've gotten better at acknowledging that stuff in the adventures, to be like, well, you know, there's a decent chance you didn't do X, Y, and Z before you got here, and here's why, and here's ways that you can spin it. And we've also kind of liked the idea that there's a through line between of the Forgotten Realms, between, you know, what happened in Tyranny of Dragons to, you know, Elemental Evil, and Curse of Strahd kind of happens in a separate thing, but then there's a way that you can tie them all together. And I really like that section of our adventure books, because it feels like it's, you know, the game world is a real live thing that is moving and shifting based on, you know, events, but also on what your player characters may or may not do. So I get that too, but I think it's just a general, you know, nut to crack of how to write adventures in ways that satisfy so many different play styles and DM styles. I really like the visual way that our graphic artists and our art directors have figured out a way to kind of present the D&D, you know, adventurer modules in like a really attractive way. Like I just love just thumbing through those books and making them feel as you know, fun as possible when you're getting that like new smell, and you're like, oh god, this is so great. But I realize that not everybody digests stuff in the right way, you know, in the same way. So I'm always looking for new ideas. So if anybody in chat has any ideas about how to better present this material, or even on Twitter, like, you know, just let us know. I mean, we're always open to new ideas, because we know that it can be a barrier for entry, and we're trying to reduce those and get rid of them as much as possible.
Yeah, I have to say, by the way, I love, because I'm a huge fan of like just the art of adventures, like both when it comes to like NPC portraits and stuff. I love using those because I run a lot of games on Roll20, and as Will was saying, Encounter Roleplay was saying, I haven't got my hands on it, but he's pretty highly praising the Roll20 version of Storm King's Thunder, because that's what he bought and is using for us. And
nice.
I will probably get my hands on it at some point, because I do a lot of Roll20 stuff, and I'd like to see how everything's set up there. But, I was so excited that we got them on board as a licensee. Like, they're just, you know, different than Fantasy Grounds. I think Fantasy Grounds, it's similar to, you know, how DMs digest this stuff differently. They work for different audiences there, and I love that we now have more options for how people organize their thoughts. I've heard people that use them not even in online games, but in, you know, just as a dungeon master tool that helps them kind of digest this stuff. And as we get into more and more of a digital world, I feel like that's going to happen even more and more. That people are going to only buy books in Roll20 or in Fantasy Grounds going forward. This is just a personal question. Aside though, is there actually, like, do you actually know if there's a reason why Wizards decided not to do PDF versions of their adventures and books?
PDFs are tough. I mean, I think what we have found is that people want PDFs. People say they want PDFs. They want it. But what they really, and this is not just putting words in our mouth, but I think this is as players and dungeon masters here, like, they really want a way to consume this stuff digitally. And PDF is actually like a really, I mean, you know, it's an old format. It's not really conducive to the modern changing world. Is kind of how we feel. So, we're trying to figure out ways to make this stuff, all this material, because you're right, the artwork and everything is a huge part of getting people into these worlds. Present it in a way that's going to make everyone feel happy and be like, yes, that's what we want. That's what we've always wanted as far as a digital publishing future for Dungeons and Dragons books. And I think part of our partnerships with Roll20 and Fantasy Grounds is realizing this is a way that people are really consuming this stuff and using it. And I think perhaps a Wizards of the Coast of the past wouldn't have been as excited about Roll20 and Fantasy Grounds, but now that we're entering this way going forward, I think there's going to be people who are going to do things in a way that's better than the way that we can do them, and we find that it's we want to make them better at their jobs and make sure it stays true to what Dungeons and Dragons is, as far as us as the the stewards of the brand and the stewards of all that story and lore, and just give them all the tools that they can to make it sing and make it be as good as it can be.
Let me give you an anecdote, because way back in the dark depths of 4th edition, when Wizards had their compendium online. I ran a lot of 4th edition games when Roll20 had just started up, because it was a new edition, and they seemed to go well at the time together, and also 4th edition was kind of what got me back into DMing, and so there was a site that, because I was using the character builder, the downloaded character builder thing that Wizards made. Which was,
I love that thing.
Yeah, it was really, really cool. Nowadays, I am so, I use, because I run Pathfinder a lot, I use Hero Lab pretty much in the same way. Not for 5th edition so much, because 5th edition support on Hero Lab, not the best. But I think that's because Wizards hasn't officially partnered with them or anything to get that out. They kind of just pulled stuff in the SRD, which has been incomplete. But whatever. So I was using but the character builder was really cool because it had all the feats and all the powers and stuff there. So if you took there was a site that if you took a character builder output file and uploaded it to this site, it would give you a sheet, kind of like a Roll20 character sheet, with clickable buttons and stuff like that. And all of the powers and all of the feats and stuff would link to their compendium entry, so you could click them and it would pop up the official rules version of that. And it's I loved how that worked. That it was such an intuitive system. It was a little bit kind of out of the way because you had to have the character builder and you had to know this website and that it existed to use it, and you had to have a compendium link. But but it was one of those things where I am in my heart, I kind of hope that we get sort of digital support like that, where one day we can just sort of have character, I can just link my things to the rules, and I click a feat and the rules come up there, and it's not separated. I like the way 4E has integrated the SRD into their character sheets. I think it works really well, and as a 5th edition DM now, it's really cool being able to search the rules and stuff in Roll20. That speeds up my game a lot because I don't have to go outside of it to look at the D20 PFSRD or something like that for a rule.
Right.
I'm excited to see how buying adventures, buying published adventures, kind of melds with that, because being able to, for example, use if I bought Storm King's Thunder, being able to use that in the same way. So it's if I needed a name of an NPC, I could search it and it gives me or I needed what happens in in this dungeon, and you can pull up a thing. I think that's really, really cool functionality, a really good functionality that I hope we can
I made so many characters on that 4th edition character builder. In many ways, that was my favorite part of that edition because it was so integrated with everything and with all of the different character options that were, that was the bread and butter of 4th edition at that time. It was just a way to stay current and be oh, hey, this is, I can use this Shardbind race here and make I probably made, and I hear anecdotally that I'm not alone. I made hundreds of characters on that character builder just because it was so easy and fun. Yeah, you're just like, oh, let's do this. I'm never going to use it. I don't even, don't even give it a name. It doesn't need a name. It just needs to be, character number 5. Mambo number 5, in fact. But it was, it also was really important in that edition. Like, I feel like that worked really well with the way that characters and combat was done in 4th edition. Like, it was this kind of a tactical combat heavy system that meant all of your powers were about pushing and pulling on a grid, and there were definitely ways to make it a more theater of the mind style gameplay, but that wasn't its focus. Its focus was on making it this kind of miniature play, and so having all of those rules fiddly bits be in a tool like that made a lot of sense, because that was in some ways what was the selling point of that game for a lot of people. But 5th, I feel like, went in a different direction, where character and story is drawn to the forefront a lot more in how things are presented. Even just in the standard character sheets, how flaws and backgrounds and tenets and all those things that are a part of character creation is on the front of your sheet as being way more, as important as your stats, as important as strength checks, is like, what are your bonds, what are your flaws, and that doesn't seem as conducive to that kind of a character builder. I mean, obviously, there are tables and charts and stuff in there, and you can be like, just pick one of the bonds, for the charlatan background, and you could certainly do that, but to me, what makes the power of 5th edition so strong is that having the feats and having the things are less important. And maybe it's just me aging a bit as a player, like and maybe being more of a DM, but like, I love those things about Dungeons and Dragons way more. Like, I love feeling the drama and story and if a player is going to backstab another player or an NPC that they've been with for a long time, like, those are the things that I think are really interesting and cool. We focus on those over the first couple of years of 5th edition, and I want to see more of that go forward. But there is part of me who just really loves that 4th edition character making. In 3rd edition, I used it was an Excel sheet. God, and I'm blanking on the name of the person. It was a Canadian, and they made basically an Excel spreadsheet that was like 300 megs or something like that. It was like all of this programming in the Excel spreadsheet to basically make 3.5
I think I remember
characters.
that, yeah.
I'm blanking on what the name of it. I think it was like Hero Forge or Heroescape or something like that. Maybe it was a predecessor to the Hero Labs.
Hero Forge. I think that's what I remember that name for some reason. Anvil. Is that? But
I actually paid the guy I ended up PayPaling the guy to be like, I just want to use this, and it was before Kickstarter and before Patreon and all that stuff. So I just essentially sent the dude like $20 and was like, yeah, I want access to this. So the part of me really does love that idea, and in fact, I wrote based on like, I didn't realize Excel could do all this fun stuff. I wrote a sheet that basically rolled damage and attacks for my 20th level ranger. Because by the time you got to 20th level, and if you took the right feats or whatever, I was doing 6 attacks a round. And you were mentioning before about how you drink a little bit during the games. By the time you got to 11 p.m. on a Friday night, and you had to roll 6 d20s and add the modifiers that were different based on who your targets were. I had an extra die 6 against undead creatures and an extra die 6 because some of them are flaming arrows. I couldn't do any of that math, and it wasn't just drinking. There were some other inebriants as well that made me not very good at adding and or subtracting. So I wrote this program during the day at my day job, so I could be like, I'm just gonna attack, and I would press the random button, and I cleared all this with my DM to be like, hey dude, I know I'm slowing down the game, this is going to help speed it up. And then I'd be like, okay, I did 75 points of damage on the big bad guy, or like, I split up my damage to, all the people. So I love that kind of automated thing, and I think that's what's cool about like Roll20 and Fantasy Grounds that really gets me excited, is like how they've made combat so much easier to calculate. So you're not really thinking about those modifiers and adding and subtracting. You're really just concentrating on the fun and narrating that stuff, and I think that's great.
There's a thing, I use a lot of API scripts for Roll20, and there's a slightly less functional one for 5th edition. I'm waiting on them to update the 5th edition one, but on my Pathfinder games I always have a script that and this is why I was waiting so long for the 5th edition SRD that works a lot like the D20 PFSRD, where it's just got like the text formatted stat blocks so that you can kind of copy and paste them, because the way I have it set up on my Pathfinder games is I just copy the stat block from like the SRD and paste it, and then I just hit a button and it generates like it populates like that NPC's HP and armor class, and it makes all of their attacks and their skill checks into like buttons that I can just press to roll. And it's awesome. It's such a good script, and it sets the token. It gives me initiative macros and everything. It's probably like the it's one of the things that has sped up my prep on Roll20 so much, that like, because I can just sort of drop a block in, hit a thing, it's generated, and I can just put them on as many pages as I need, because I don't have to keep, I don't have to worry about doing the math and kind of setting these things up manually, which is again one of those things that like the Storm King's Thunder and the new Wizards published Roll20 things already have set up. Like, they've already got all the macros and the attacks and everything for all of the things, which but before that existed, and if you're doing it for adventures that don't have that, we have to put it in manually, and that's one of the things that's made my life so much easier. I love Hero Lab as a program. Like, I'm horrible at math. I'm horrible at like not just the math that comes with rolling, but like I'm horrible at looking at a character and being like, okay, so what do I get this level? Like, what do I have access to? It says like, because sometimes there's so many options. It's like, I don't even, what spells do I have access to? What items can I take? And so it's having a program that just has all of that system information already in, that you can just like scroll down the list and be like, oh, that sounds cool, I'll look at that. It's a lot like, and
that's what made, I mean, in 4th there was thousands and thousands of feats and powers with which to choose from. So I feel like, that having that kind of stuff was way more important. But with the 5th Player's Handbook, I mean, there are feats and there are things, but there's not an exhaustive number of them. And I don't even remember the last time I made a character that had feats. It was mostly just more of the basic stuff. But I'm not really a min-maxer type player, and I know that there are people out there who do love that part of the game and want to hammer on a system until they find a broken character, and I get that. I think that's equally valid, and I think we'd love to develop tools that help those players out as well.
So we know we were going to get to it, and then we kind of sidetracked ourselves. I know you had another book with you that you were really excited about, and you wanted to show off a little bit.
Yeah, so we just got these in the office. This is Dungeonology. It is made by Candlewick Press, a UK thing. It's written by Matt Forbeck, who is a very prodigious author, fantasy author.
Slide it over your face so they can see it, because right now, there you go.
Oh, you had cut it. All right,
there you go. It's
it's good. Even though there's a scary mind flayer on the front.
We can see
scary mind flayer. Yeah. Even though there's a scary, right, and it's got some kind of like sheen to it too. But this is a cool book that's going to come out this fall, and it is. I'm not going to be able to really show it off too well, but it basically has a bunch of pop-up books and bits and things that you can delve into, flaps to open up, and it's it doesn't really sugarcoat anything, and it's very much like a game, a book that sells Dungeons and Dragons to an audience that may not know, have the decades worth of knowledge that you and I have. You know what I mean? So I got excited about this because I have kids. I have a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old, and they're already pretending. They're already Dragons, but I haven't played with them yet. And I think something like this would be a great gift for something like there's a small spell book within the book here that has like mending and light and firebolt. It also has a lot of background on the Forgotten Realms itself. Like this is the Forgotten Realms kind of section, and then I like this because it opens up into a large format version of the Faerun map with lots of information about it as well. So yeah, I'm excited about it just because it's coming out, and there's lots of like little things to explore and look at. Like I don't even know what this is, and I don't want to open it up because I'm only using one hand. It has things about the factions like Zentarum and the Harpers, all about them. You know, some iconic monsters, owl bears. What are those? Here's a little thing about dragons in this little like mini book within a book here. And there's a bunch of like fun. Here's a Volo's Guide to the Forgotten Realms, which is a whole other book that is in here that has its own. Looks like I think it's got 16 pages in it here, and then of course a fun little dragon hologram. So I'm excited about that kind of stuff and working with new partners and new people to develop these books. The ology books are a thing that this imprint has been doing for a long time, and then they approached us about doing a dungeonology book. We were like, yeah, we'd love to get that kind of the way to tap into a different audience, people who may not really know about Dungeons and Dragons or didn't grow up having their older brothers' Dungeons and Dragons books on their shelves and starting a lifetime of fascination with it. So I'm hoping that this will end up on a lot of people's shelves, and then kids will dig into it without necessarily their parents' permission and learn more about the things, or totally have their parents' permission. Maybe I'm projecting my old Catholic guilt of loving all this stuff. I remember going into the public library in East Lyme, Connecticut, had a copy of Deities and Demigods, and I would always go in and pore over those pages to be like, look, here's Zeus and Thor, and their stats are all right here. Now it's amazing. So yeah. Hopefully, new stuff like that will start to create and engender that kind of love in a new generation of Dungeons and Dragons players.
So I wanted to. By the way, I Dice Thulu has casually reminded you that generally at the halfway point of the show, we're gonna start taking questions in just a little bit. But Kailania, who, by the way, thank you for following, Kailania, and welcome to the madness. As Dice Thulu embraces you as well as all of the rest of us.
Madness.
They said, Kailania said, I'm confused by this book. Is it part of the 5e line or not? So, is it sort of an official release, or is it a sort of like an unofficial, or like it's not really a rule book or a
It's an officially licensed. It's an officially licensed book, so it has the actual Dungeons and Dragons. Well, you can't see it. The actual Dungeons and Dragons logo on there, and we licensed this concept to Candlewick Press, and they're publishing it, basically hired Matt Forback with our blessing, and we worked closely with Matt as far as making sure that all of his material was accurate to the Forgotten Realms, and so it's not an official Wizards of the Coast publication in the 5e line, but it is a completely accurate licensed product, similar to how WizKids produces our miniatures, or Gale Force 9 produces the unpainted miniatures for us, it's an official. It's in the 5th edition ecosystem, but it's not published specifically by Wizards of the Coast. So I get your confusion, totally understand. That's why I like it as a product, is because we probably wouldn't have been able to produce something like this on our own. But when Candlewick came to us and said they had this idea, we were like, yeah, totally, and we'll help you out and make sure it's all accurate and feels very much like it's in the Dungeons and Dragons world. So hopefully that answered your question.
Yes, well, it seems I did, because Kailania says, fine, I pre-ordered it, Greg. Thank you for showing it off.
Good. Well, good. I'm glad I sold one copy at least. I'm just going to bring it home and show it to my 5-year-old. I'm sure she's going to get a kick out of opening up all those things.
Also, now you can get that promotion. because you sold a copy. That's how it works at Wizards, I assume.
Good enough. Yeah. It's like, I got one, guys, and we'll go up and it'll ring the bell. Bing, bing, bing. And we're like, good job, Greg.
How many copies do you need to? How many copies do you need to sell to get Chris Perkins' job, including like the going around and hanging out with celebrities and stuff?
I probably. I don't think he's not measured in that way. I don't think he had to sell X amount of copies to get his job. So, he's got a totally different subset of skills that he needs to execute on in order to keep his job. I mean, he's not, he's not number one or anything. He needs to make sure he's doing his job. He's probably doing right now in another room.
I love the fact that he has an official title. I think he's story designer at D&D.
His principal story designer, and I'm not sure if he requested the principal or not, but I like that there's like the principal story designer.
No, but I love the fact that he has that title, yet almost like 90% of the things that you actually see him do have nothing to do with that. Like he's on shows, like live shows and stuff, and he's on, he does the streaming things like that. Like no one actually sees him doing the story designing. We just see him, on stage.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the last two books, I mean, he wrote pretty much Curse of Strahd, and he basically wrote the first drafts anyway of Storm King's Thunder. So, I mean, that's the proof in the pudding right there. Is that we worked with outside licensors for the first few adventure books for 5th edition. So we worked with Cobalt Press, as well as Green Ronin, and I'm blanking on. We did one more as well, Sasquatch. So Chris, worked a lot closely with them. They developed they wrote most of that story, and then we edited it and developed it afterwards. So it was very much, made in-house, but they generated a lot of that stuff. And for the last two books, though, Curse of Strahd and Storm King's Thunder, they were principally written by Chris. And then once, there's playtests and figuring out whether, what things work and trying to, change things around that way. But so it's very much a team effort in producing those adventure books. But he actually said in an episode of Dragon Talk for the Storm King's Thunder that he went home during at Wizards, because we have a week off between Christmas and New Year's every year, and he took an extra week off and basically wrote Curse of Strahd at the end of 2015. Took some time, wrote it all up himself, and it was like, all right, here we go. So it's very much even though he does all these appearances and is running his own stream, which I think is probably wrapping up right about now. So if you're coming from over there, hi, how you guys doing? He has a whole full-time job in addition to doing all of his public appearances, which seems crazy.
Yeah, no, that's
luckily
why
he's only got a dog.
That's why I think it's funny because I think a lot of people just think like Chris is that guy that they can wheel out to DM on stage for Wizards.
Yeah, we'll be doing that for 40 years, going forward. We'll get 90-year-old Chris Perkins and be like, roll him out, guys. It's
yeah, Shadzo, you're right. I do know some of his work. I haven't read Dungeon in a while, but I've used a couple things from it. I don't think Chris wrote any of the things I've ever used, but I've used a lot of modules from Dungeon in a lot of my games. Which ones come to mind? Oh god, what's the hell is the name of that key? The module with the key? I don't remember. There was a module about a key that could open any lock, and we got part 1, and I think part 2 and 3 were written somewhere else that have been lost to time. I've also ran the one I've just blanked on it. The adventure that with the worm that walks. Oh god.
That was also in Dungeon?
Yeah, I'm trying to. I literally blanked on the name of it, and I'm trying to remember it, and I look like an idiot now.
this is compelling content. Whenever
I know.
That was the joke we always did when I did I was do a podcast in North Carolina at the Escapist, and would always be like, whenever we're doing that thing, we're like, oh God, what was it? It was the name of a movie, and there was this guy in it, and we would always be like, dude, this is the worst content in the world. Like, no one wants to watch this stuff. I'm like, no, but it's a guy, and he's wearing pants. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, So, but when you're doing a podcast, you have the luxury of being able to edit that out.
It's true. We never did, but that always took too much work.
You could if you wanted to.
It's true. It's true. But yeah, no, Chris had a really long career publishing both the magazines. I think he had a hand in both Dungeon and Dragon magazines as editor. So he not only did he write a lot of that content himself, but he also was the gatekeeper and made sure that all the content on those two magazines were always stellar, and why they're so fondly remembered for now. I missed that part of Dungeons and Dragons fandom. Maybe it had to do with the fact that I had a strong Catholic upbringing, so I couldn't really have magazines with demons and dwarves being sent to my address every day. Probably more often could have gotten Playboy or Penthouse. That probably would have been fine, but the demons, no way. We don't want those. But here in the office, they have going back, to all of the old issues of Dungeons and Dragons and Dungeon and Dragon, the two magazines. So I have all those issues now, and I'm so excited to start delving into them and getting some more DM ideas because, like I said, it was just a part of being a fan of this game that I just missed. I just never got any of that content, so it's all new to me.
What I lament,
which is exciting.
What I lament the most, I think, is that there are attempts of it, but no one's ever really created an archive that says, like, these are the adventures that were published in this episode of this issue of Dungeon Magazine, because there's just I have PDF versions of like 300 issues, something like that. I think they sold a CD-ROM of them at one point, so that's why a lot of those PDFs were out there. Yeah, so there's definitely that level of stuff, but you're right, there is no comprehensive online list of all those things, and I think maybe that's an initiative we'll think about for the Dungeon Masters Guild going forward, is getting a lot of those bite-sized adventures up there. I think that's one of the cool things that we've done this last year is making sure that there's smaller adventures up there, and I love that the community is able to contribute to that, and in many ways it takes over, some of that periodic, small content that Dungeon and Dragon used to do. Now it's just being created by people like you, and I think that's awesome. Yeah, no,
more people should do it.
The Dungeon Masters Guild has been really cool. There's it's always interesting, especially when you have a new adventure comes out. Like when I started Out of the Abyss, the first thing I did was I looked at the Dungeon Masters Guild and I'm like, all right, what have people written for this? Because that way, at the very least, when I can tell what people are writing for it, I can generally tell where I'm probably going to need to put more of my prep time. Because if we're prepping...
Oh, interesting.
We're prepping a book of information about this city, or we're prepping more side quests to fill out the travel time, which a lot of them did. They prepped for Out of the Abyss. They wrote a lot of little modules, or compilations of encounters and stuff that would fill the travel time, because there's a lot of travel time in Out of the Abyss. So, that was one of the things...
There can be, for sure. You can hand-wave a lot of it, but yeah, there was definitely... That was the fun part for me, was trying to figure out what they did getting from place to place. And I'm glad that people filled that up with, and it was probably, I hope that this is the case, so correct me if I'm wrong, but I bet it was a lot of stuff that people improvised and just did, and it was like, this is probably pretty good. We should come up with, a compilation of all these things that we made up on the fly, and put it together into something that other people can enjoy. And that's just continuing the storytelling legacy of Dungeons and Dragons, and I think it's great. And I think I want more people to pay attention. Someone's got to knock Matt Mercer out of that top spot. So one of you listening right now is going to be able to do it. I know it.
No, there for Out of the Abyss particularly, there were two compilations that someone made. And some of the encounters were kind of generic, but some of them were really, really engaging. My players had a blast with them, because they were they're encounters that seemed like a fight at first, but then they kind of turned it on its head. And the players had to deal with it, because it was a lot of what Out of the Abyss did kind of in itself. with having creatures that you think would be evil but are kind of open to, they just kind of want something from you. So there are a lot of encounters that were written that were like that, and it was Adventures in the Dark Lake or something like that. I don't remember. I had the PDFs, but they were very, very good, and I like those two supplements in particular. I also found a JavaScript generator that would literally just generate like as many travel days as you wanted, and it would tell you like what plants and stuff the players could harvest on certain days, and like where they would find a campsite. And
That's awesome.
So it was using the rules that were in the book, because the book had like a table of things you could roll on for like what they would come across, and it was using those rules, and it would basically you could use this as like you could roll up a couple days and then use that as a framework to say like to improv what would happen, and then be like, okay, you're traveling for a couple days, and then eventually you come to this clearing, there's orcs, that kind of thing. I like little tools like that. But
I do too. I think that adds a lot of flavor to the travel time, for sure. Yeah, and it basically spools up what I think when I asked Chris Perkins about this, what his favorite part of that adventure was, and he really liked. I think it's a section in the beginning when they're talking about what it's like traveling through the Underdark, and he outlines I think 3 or 4 different encounters, and that's where what you were mentioning, how you met evil creatures that weren't necessarily evil, like Galabagul.
Oh my god, my party loved
the sentient,
him so much.
Yeah, mine did too, and I feel like it was such a great idea to have like this kind of buddy pet idea of, and they liked Stool as well too, the Myconid sprout. They really latched onto him, but yeah, those were his favorite parts of the book because it was, little mini adventures that just had interesting characters that players just really love to latch onto, and then the bonds that were created in those little small adventures were somehow larger than the huge demon lords attacking. It was like the macro and the micro.
Yeah, Globagul
so that's pretty cool.
was such like that was. I think it was, for me as a DM, it was such a funny thing to rate at first that like when I got it, I sort of knew exactly where it would go, and then I kind of ran that encounter to my players. Like they walked in that room, and there was this blot. Like one of them almost walked into the cube, and the eyes just kind of rolled over and like looked at him, and just kind of, and I can't quote exactly. There's a video on the YouTube of this happening, but it's like. I have a player who's been playing since like AD&D. He's an older guy, and he went nuts at the idea of actually being able to like talk. He was like, "Dude, this is like I'm like a kid again. Like this is right back to like those fighting.
Oh, that's awesome.
Those things in the dungeon. But it's like, can I like I'm gonna take this thing as my animal companion. Like this is my ranger companion now." And it was so interesting because like they had to get out of this dungeon. That's the one where they have to like crawl up through this crack. And
right,
I
the
had
sunken temple.
Yeah. I had them come out on like a ledge, and they had to find a way to like get down to because they had gotten trapped. The party, they had to find a way like out of this hole to get down, like way down where the rest of the group was. And they were like, we could just rappel down. And then the player was like, no, we can't. The gelatinous cube can't go down. And he's like, we got to find another way. And so like that was a lot of their adventure, was finding a way to like make it through the Underdark with this slow moving cube like still there, but no one wanted to give him up. It was a lot of fun. But I don't want to dwell on nostalgia too much, because we do want to take some questions, and I do have a couple rolling in. So I want to get to them real quick. So Kailania asked before, and sorry for delaying this a little bit. Kailania says, any plans for adventures not set in the Sword Coast regions? I know Chris has been fielding this question a lot on Twitter.
Yeah, we've been concentrating on that region just because there's so much material and lore and stories that can be told in that region. So it's it's very varied. Also, it has that kind of classic Points of Light feel, where there are cities and settlements that people know and recognize, like Neverwinter and Baldur's Gate, and then there's outside of those areas there's some towns, and then there's some wilderness. So it's got the perfect mix that's ripe for adventures and stuff. But the Forgotten Realms is a big place. There are lots of locations that have lots of stuff written about them, and maybe even not so much stuff written about them. So, there's definitely. Even just Storm King's Thunder, even though it takes place generally in the north, that as outlined in the Swordcased Adventurer's Guide, it's all over the place. It's not just in one region or one small area. You go from the frozen north to the spine of the world to back to the actual coast itself with the major cities there. A lot of travel involved in Storm King's Thunder, and I think that's a hint of us kind of expanding our scope a little bit in the stories that we're going to tell.
So, I guess
yes.
To add on that, like, do you guys internally, like, I know you don't generally talk about, like, Chris says a lot that you don't really talk about what you plan on writing in the future. I don't even know if you guys have a set list of what you are going to write next. But it's like there's a lot of D&D stuff out there. Like, there's Al-Qadim, there's like Dark Sun, and then I mean, even as weird as like Spelljammer. Like, are you guys planning on, or have you guys thrown around the office any idea, like any possibility of going somewhere weird?
Well, I think Curse of Strahd was the promise of that, in that he was not really set in the Forgotten Realms. I mean, it's a separate shard of existence, and in the Dungeon Masters Guild for 5th edition, we outline how it's a multiverse, and each one of these settings that you mentioned, Dragonlance, Dark Sun, Birthright, even, that they all exist in the same ecosystem that is Dungeons and Dragons, and even Greyhawk. I think in Curse of Strahd, do you think people will care if I give any minor spoilers?
Well, I mean, Nathan Stewart might.
He doesn't care. He won't care. But what I'll say is that there's definitely some connections. If you follow the dots and the lines in Curse of Strahd, there's some connections to Greyhawk, and even in the Acquisitions Incorporated, the series, the artifact that they're going after is the Rod of Seven Parts, and the whole myth of that story, Mishka the wolf spider fighting with the Wind Dukes of Aqua, that is very Greyhawk. I mean, that was one, those are things that Gary Gygax himself, created and took stuff from his home game and made it, canon in Dungeons and Dragons. And that's, present in 5th edition now. So there's definitely, a chance for us to explore those worlds again. We're trying to figure out the best way to do it for right now, but the Forgotten Realms is so rich with storytelling possibilities that we just don't think we've exhausted it yet. So for now, we're really gonna, continue to play in that sandbox and explore different areas and ones you may not have seen before, or then come back to the old areas. To answer your question, we do definitely have our future publications mapped out for years and years to come. So there's always some adjustments and changing, but in order to keep up this publication schedule, we have to know what's coming down the line. We obviously can't talk about it more specifically than that, but it's exciting. I think there's a lot of D&D to explore still, so yeah, we're gonna get there. We're gonna get there eventually, but I'm also really excited for other people. If you want to make a 5th edition Spelljammer campaign, go for it, man. I think that's that's totally within your power, man. Like, it's all there. You can do it.
Yeah, but it won't really be.
There's someone running a Spelljammer.
It won't really be right until it's like a licensed Spelljammer source book.
I see that. I guess as a former fan of Wizards of the Coast, I would say the same thing. But I also really love the creativity of the entire community, and I think people always want to explore and do it on their own. Who knows? Maybe if you put something like that on the Dungeon Masters Guild and we see it, we'll be like, hey, look, this is what people want. It's super popular. This is stuff that is within the realm of the possibility for us to do, and look how much people love it. So why don't we do that? And that we're always looking at what the community is doing, not just on Dungeon Masters Guild, but in general. So if there's demand, we will supply. But I just want to say there's someone who's running an old version of Spelljammer in the office right now as a lunchtime game, which I find super exciting.
Oh god, they're using like the second edition rules for that.
I think he's actually using the first one. No, the first edition rules for Spelljammer.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Like the actual Spelljammer product.
Yeah, it's been so like I think I played a little bit of Spelljammer a long time ago, back when I was probably 15 or 16, like when I was working at a summer camp. I had a friend that we get together and play D&D every summer with. So that was the last time I had any interaction with it, but
I've never actually played, so I can't speak to it too much. I did read a little bit of Traveller, the Traveller kind of, I wouldn't say it's an imitator, but it was definitely like another spacefaring adventure game.
Yeah, Traveller system.
And I remember reading those books and being like, oh yeah, this is really interesting, but I'm never gonna play it. Similar to EVE Online, where like I'm excited that it exists and I want to hear stories about people playing in it, but it's just not. I'm not going to devote time to it. It's just not my taste.
Yeah. Oh god. I did want to give a little bit of a plug though. If you're looking for something a little bit different, like if I don't know, maybe Forgotten Realms is getting a little stale for you, or you just want something different, go check out Kobold Press's Midgard setting. It's a pretty expansive setting. I know they just put out the Southlands book, which is like all fantasy. The way I can describe it is like fantasy Africa. It's a huge book. It's got a lot of stuff in it, and I mean, they're great. They do great work over at Kobold Press, so you probably won't be disappointed with their Midgard stuff.
I am a big fan of Wolfgang and all that he does.
Yeah, I haven't actually had a chance.
We actually just had him on the podcast.
Go ahead.
We just had him on the podcast again. I think it was the third time. So he's really been a fun, kind of friend of the show that we would definitely want to keep having back. And he's local too, so that helps. But you should. If I'll put in a good word and see if he wants to talk to you. I know he's got a book he's trying to promote.
Yeah, I haven't hung out with Wolfgang. I've hung out with Ben McFarland. He was on the show back when the Southlands book just came out, and he's a really cool guy. And I've been in touch with Kobold just back and forth since then. But I haven't gotten a chance to sit down with Wolfgang. That's something that I think would be really, really interesting, because I know he's been around forever and he's worked on everything. Yeah. If you want to hear about his background, go listen to the first one of Dragon Talk. We really went to like how he got hired at TSR. It's a crazy story. Yeah, I will have to check that out. I do want to jump to the next question. Where was I? Question from Shadzar. It says, Greg, when did you start playing D&D if you were stuck in the Bible Belt, unable to be involved with, quote, the demons due to the Jack Chick crowd? Which, addendum to that question, have you seen the Dead Gentleman's video about that? No, I haven't yet, but I think I remember hearing about it's basically like a dramatization of the Jack Chick. Yes, it's great. It's amazing. Where, Falling Leaf. I'm Falling Leaf. You killed her. Yeah, so I can't wait to see that. But I grew up reading the books. For some reason, my mom allowed my older brother to have a copy of Dungeons and Dragons that he didn't, he was like, oh, whatever, and then he put it on his shelf. So when I was talking about older brothers having it on their shelf, that's how I discovered it, because I was like 6 or 7 and being like, oh, what's this? This is cool. But when you're that old, you can't really create your own playtime. So none of my peers were really into that. And so by the time I got to be like a teenager, I was like, hey, let's play this game. None of my friends were into it then either, so I had to try and make friends who would play, and then that's where the parental control came in, was because when you're that young, you can't drive anywhere. So I had to basically ask them, like, where are you going? I'm like, I'm going to go to this guy's house to play Dungeons & Dragons. They're like, what? Wait, you can't do that. But they did allow it, I think, once or twice. There was a guy I worked with
at like a beach club. He was like the dishwasher who was like 18 and I was like 15 at the time. And I was like, oh, you play Dungeons and Dragons? He's like, you should read this book. It's Eye of the World by Robert Jordan. He was like basically like a nerd mentor to me. But he played with his longtime game and I played with him a couple times. But he lived in the town over, so I couldn't really convince my mom to drive me over there anymore. And it was around that time that my mom sat me down and made me watch this video someone at her church had given her, which was mostly about how rock and roll was the devil, and how that was, making me into an awful person. But there was like one or two lines about Dungeons and Dragons in there that I guess was the reason why she put it on. She made me watch that, and she was like, "You really shouldn't do this." And I heard from someone at church that they let their son play, and now he doesn't have any friends, and we don't want you to end up like that. And I was like, what? That's bullshit. Even back then, I was like,
I was hoping you were going to say
like equating the reason why.
I was hoping you were going to say like they let or his son played, and now he has magic powers.
And now he lives in the steam tunnels, and is a wizard. So I mean, it was just a lot of ridiculous stuff. But I ended up playing a couple more times in college. I went to the University of Connecticut, was in the theater program, and I had a lot of friends adjacent to my circle of friends who played. So I played a couple times with them. And then nothing really latched on. I never had like a permanent campaign until I lived in New York and I got married. And then a year after that, I was like, here I am. I'm living in like, one of the major cities of the world. And I'm sure there's someone here who plays Dungeons and Dragons. And I'm an adult. I'm married. I can make my own choices. I'm going to go play Dungeons and Dragons. And I told my wife, and she's like, what? She's like, what? And maybe the period that we were like dating was only like, college to, mid-20s, right? And she was like, you never told me that you were into Dungeons and Dragons. I'm like, I know. Isn't that crazy? So I started like going, weekly. I went through a few groups until I found this amazing group of people, one of which, this might have been the reason why I latched onto it and it was great, was because one of them was a very wealthy individual in the Upper West Side of Manhattan, and he had a great apartment. And for the first 6 months of when we were playing, we would go. We actually played the Age of Worms campaign, one of the first.
That's the one I couldn't remember the name of. Oh my god.
That's it.
That's it.
Yeah.
I feel like
I love
an idiot
that
now.
campaign, mostly because it was my first taste into a long form campaign like this. That's the campaign that I had the Ranger, where I had to, create the Excel spreadsheet to make 6 attacks. But the wife got so annoyed at us coming into their posh apartment that he was able to rent a separate apartment solely to play Dungeons and Dragons. That's how wealthy they were. So it ended up being this great, kind of like clubhouse, nerdy, Upper West Side studio apartment where we played Dungeons and Dragons and smoked all kinds of things, and had a really great ongoing story that went on for like 2 or 3 years. We played Age of Worms, but it was heavily improvised, and he added a whole bunch of homebrew stuff to it that was all about like developing our characters. I remember my character was like an orphan, and then he like found ways to introduce both like my mother who left us, and then my father. All this, I was a half elf. It was like great. Really, really, really created a lot of drama. So that was like that's where I latched on to. That this is something that's going to be like my lifelong passion is finally like happened. Like this is my idealized version of Dungeons and Dragons. So I played from like 2004 to 2007 with that group, and funnily enough, that group went on to do amazing things. Tavis Allison was a co-writer and co-designer of the Adventurer Conqueror King system that I ended up doing with him. A homebrew thing. I worked on a couple of books with him for Goodman Games. Mark Moreland, who works at Paizo, was in that group as well. And I think John, I'm blanking on his last name, but he was also in the Paizo Superstar competition. He got like a runner-up or something like that. So like, funnily enough, and Eitan Bernstein was also in there, and he was a freelancer for Wizards of the Coast in like the 4th edition era as well. So it was cool that like a lot of the people who were in this same kind of formative group for me went on to do amazing stuff as well. And then kind of been playing ever since.
Yeah.
Sorry, that was a long answer to that question, but yeah, that was the way I got around it eventually, was to be an adult and to move out of the house, and that was the only way I was able to play Dungeons and Dragons with my oppressive mother.
I still feel the need to point out to maybe just to Shadzar, Connecticut, as far as I know, not the Bible Belt, unless I am living somewhere that I did not think I was living. If you don't know, by the way, I live in New York, just outside the city, so
Okay.
you know, I know the area very well.
Where do you live?
Long Island.
You live on Long Island, okay.
Yes.
I spent, well, I mean, I lived in Brooklyn, so I basically was living on Long Island as well. For 10 years I lived there.
Yeah, my brother.
And it was right when I moved out when the D20 store opened in Williamsburg. It was like right across, right where I was living, where was this great, amazing game store opened up, and it's been like this. Now it feels like it's a little bit of a mecca for gamers to kind of get together and play. And I totally missed it. Like opened like months after I moved away, so I'm sad about that.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever been there. Whenever I'm in Brooklyn, I always go visit the Complete Strategist, or the Brooklyn Strategist, which a friend of mine works at now.
Yeah.
And it's, by the way, if you're in New York and you want to meet like D&D playing celebrities, that's where you go, because that's where they tend to congregate apparently. At the Brooklyn Strategist. No, but my brother lives over there in Bed-Stuy, so every time I visit him, I go to the Strategist. It's a cool little place.
Nice.
Yeah. No,
yeah,
I
don't think I've ever been there. When did it open in? Was that always in Bed-Stuy? Because I went to the Complete Strategist.
It's not in Bed. I don't
know,
think it's not in Bed-Stuy. I don't even remember exactly where it is.
Yeah.
It's.
Yeah, I would always go to the one on 33rd to get stuff when I was in Manhattan. Funnily enough, I was actually there for the launch day of 4th edition, I think. For some reason, I was DMing at their launch event. Always freaks me out to the day. I'm like, oh, right, I always had this like weird connection with Wizards of the Coast and Dungeons & Dragons.
Yeah, the Brooklyn Strategist is actually in Cobble Hill.
Cobble Hill, okay.
Yeah.
That was always an up-and-coming neighborhood. I'm sure it's
pretty
overrun with yuppies
swanky.
now.
Yeah. No, it's pretty far. It's pretty far away from Bed-Stuy, but everywhere I go is in the cities. Like I used to travel down. Funny story about my friend. When I was in college, I got invited to play a game of D&D with one of my friends, and he had an old apartment that he had somehow managed to scoop up the rent control from a guy who like had that apartment, and then I think just
nice.
one day the old dude that lived there just left and never came back, left all his stuff, just vanished, and so he managed to get the apartment. We went in. I used to play D&D there, and when we go in, we would explore his apartment because it was really weird. There was a mirror on every single surface of the house, like a mirror between like a tiny one to like a big one. They were all different sizes, and we would find like all kinds of stashes of like wooden spikes and Anne Rice novels. So we're pretty sure that the dude who lived there was a vampire hunter.
Wow, that's awesome. Or at least cosplayed a vampire hunter before that was cool. That's awesome. Wow. Yeah, that's what I love about New York, man. There's always these weird, I mean, the rent control thing was always nuts because you had to be grandfathered into that. And the people who ended up living in those places, in some ways they felt trapped because they couldn't move away, because once you did, you lost that privilege, right? So, you ended up with crazy stories being like, I've been living in this apartment for 65 years, and you can tell from all the stuff and all the surfaces that they've been there for that long. It's amazing. I miss New York so much. I mean,
I went to school.
Seattle is definitely.
No, I went to school in I went to college in Chelsea, so I love the city.
Man, sad to hear about Chelsea.
Yeah, but it's. I wish I could afford to stay in the city, man. New York is such a nuts place right now. I want to see if I can find a question. Okay, here. So I'll take Shadzar's question in a second, but Dammit Hawk wants to know, is there any advice you'd give newer DMs as far as world building goes, or organization?
It goes back a little bit to what we were talking about. The early part of this was that the advice I always try to give new DMs especially is that, prep it as much to make you feel comfortable, but be aware that everything is going to hit the fan as soon as you start playing. And that is not a bug. That is a feature of Dungeons & Dragons. I think you should, feel comfortable, but it is way more important for you to learn how to go with the flow and make stuff up that will entertain your players going forward. So I think it's, find a scenario that works. I really prefer, as far as world building goes, I prefer the idea that you start in a small area. You have a village, you have a few important NPCs kind of in mind, and maybe one location or with a quest or some kind of task that the players have to do. That's it. You can start there, and then through improvising, you can be like, oh, well, this knight we met on the road is from the land of Scovia. And you're like, what's Scovia? I don't know. But once you go home, you can be like, I wonder what Scovia is. Is that does they have lots of orders of knights like this? Are they a religious country? And let it build organically, because I fell into the trap early on of wanting to be the Tolkien completionist and have everything completely mapped out, as well as having each language, written ahead of time. And you can get down to that. And it's the same thing with writing any kind of story. It's it's more important to get that first draft or to get that first play experience around the table out, because from then you can adjust and make things go and kind of feel a little bit more from your players. Also, new DMs, this is different from your question, which was more about organization, but new DMs shouldn't worry too much about the rules. The rules are important. You definitely don't need to have an exhaustive knowledge of them. Chances are there's someone at the table who may know them better than you. And even as as a DM, I will often trust them way more than my own knowledge. And that's it. It keeps the game moving and makes it go forward. You don't have to worry about looking up the rules and making sure you're interpreting them correctly every single time. To me, it's way more important to be like, oh, okay, that's the rule, we'll do that. Or nobody knows the rule, well, in this instance, you have an advantage based on that. It's way more important to reward cool, moves or storytelling moments than it is to make sure that you're following the letter of every rule as intended or as written. And I think Jeremy Crawford, who is kind of the co-designer with Mike Mearls on the mechanics of Dungeons and Dragons, he's taken on the mantle of being the sage and answering everyone's specific rules, minutiae questions and corner cases, and he does a great job of that with his sage advice column every month. But what I love about that is that he states, and he says it on Twitter, and he states it in that article every month, is that these are just guidelines. These are just things that you should, if you want to do what the official ruling is, these are guidelines for you. But on all honesty, it doesn't really matter. Whatever works at your table is what is more important. So don't get bogged down about knowing everything. I know I've talked to a lot of DMs be like, well, I'm worried about, not knowing what the specific instance or what each spell does. I'm like, you don't need to worry about what each spell does. You need to just have the ability to make, snap judgments. What makes it cool for you? What would make the story the most entertaining for the most number of players around the table? Not everyone, because you're never going to make sure every single person is happy at all given moments. But just make sure most people are having a good time, and that's what's more important. So, organization-wise, you're asking the wrong person, because I am not organized at all. In fact, the index cards that I used for NPCs in Out of the Abyss was probably the most organized I've ever been as far as DM prep goes. So that's something that you could do, is to create little visual aids that help you in improvising. don't let them be, crutches. I don't want you to spend time while you're DMing and being like, am I getting this note card? Am I reading this correctly? Like, just use them as mnemonics in order to spur your memory.
My tip when it comes to organization, first of all, is it really depends. Everyone's different when it comes to how they remember things and keep their mind organized. For me, I tend to just jot down like bulleted lists and like one sentence things in Notepad. And I will, like, a line might have a subline and whatever that. It's just how I do it. But you write down the things that you think you're gonna forget, and like if maybe making a shorthand kind of works for you. Like maybe maybe what works for you is putting a post-it note right on your DM screen that says, in big bold letters so you don't miss it, like, remember to do this, or remember players this. Maybe that helps you. It really, honestly, it's an individual thing. Find out what works for you as far as kind of keeping you on track and jogging your memory and being quick to reference, whether it's, you need names on the fly, or whether what you need is, I don't know, a quick rumor to come up with when the players want to talk to the tavern keeper. Like, whatever you think you're going to need at the tip of your fingers, put it there in a way that you can easily reference. As to go back, I do want to agree that with what he said when it comes to world building. I'm not going to dwell too long on this, but start small. A lot of people fall into the trap of, I'm just gonna go make a whole huge map, and it's gonna have all these cool places on it, and this, I'm gonna write lore for like these kingdoms and these factions and these places, and I'm gonna write deities, and I'm gonna write history. And it's like, you don't have to, though. Like, you can do that as you're playing. Honestly, because your players don't know the difference anyway. They're not gonna, like, a campaign's gonna start in a small place at level 1, then all you need to do is flesh out that town and make sure you know it well enough to write it, and then while the players are playing it, you can say, okay, where are they gonna go next? Well, next they're gonna go to the big city, so I can write the city and its surrounding area. And I don't need to worry about what's going on at, like, the South Pole of this world, because it has no relevance right now. It doesn't matter right now. You don't need to world build all at once. And
I think the important part that you're talking about is you don't need to. Like, if you love doing that kind of world building, and I know people do, and I do if I have infinite amount of time available, you feel free to totally do that. Like, I think there's a joy that can be had in creating all those cultures and those deities and all that stuff. But as you said, you don't need to. You can't. Don't let it be an impediment to you enjoying the game if you haven't done that stuff or don't find the time to do it. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's your players are not going to stop and ask you, hey, guy, this bandit campaign is real cool, but what's going on in the desert 100 miles south of us? It's like, they're not going to do that. But what you could try and do, something that's worked well for me, have the players write a little bit of their own lore. Have them write NPCs or things. Or maybe have
That's
them
cool
come
idea.
up. Have them come up with when I start a new campaign, I have my players write 3 NPCs that they have connections to, and those NPCs could anyone from like a bartender in a bar that they like to go to a member of the city guard that they might know and have a little bit of a rapport with, or a hunter out in the woods, whatever. But or say to the players, like, I want you to come up with something that is important to your character, and you don't have to tell me what it is. You can just sort of let it play out in the story, and then if they say, like, okay, my character's gonna ask everyone he meets if they know about, I don't know, the cut-purse bandits that live in the forest, and you say, okay, that's what this player has a thing with bandits, so now I will proceed to write a story about the bandits and how they're connected to this player, and that'll come up, and we'll see where it goes. Like, you can build things, you can let the players help you build things by asking them what they want to do.
And that does 2 things, because it takes away some of the world building from you, but then it also makes the players feel like they're connected to the world.
Yeah,
That's good.
I remember a long time ago when I was DMing, I had a player who all he told me was, everyone I talk to, I'm gonna ask about a man with a burnt face, and I don't know who that is, and I don't really care who that is, that's up to you. I'm just gonna ask people about them, and you know. And for me, like, it was a long time ago, and I didn't really appreciate it at the time, but looking back on it, it's like, I think that was probably one of the most interesting and useful tools that a player has ever handed me, because it's like, it's such an exercise in, okay, what can I do with this, and how can I make it really, really cool? You know? And I wish more players would do things like that. So I did want to, I think that goes back to what the new druid was asking about, how detailed are your notes when you DM. My notes tend to be very, very detailed for my first session, and they tend to get progressively smaller and smaller after that, because as player motivations and connections and desires start taking over where the story is going to go. The first few sessions, the DM always needs to push a little bit to get, to have the players kind of going in the direction that they, okay, this is where the story's going to go. But after that, it's kind of like when you push a bike with training wheels, like you push it for a little bit, and then after a while, you just kind of let it go to see where the players are going to take it. That's generally what I do anyway.
I'm going to agree and say that is exactly what happens with me, where I put a lot of time and energy in that first couple sessions. And then after that, it becomes very comfortable as you get to know the players and their characters as well as the NPCs. And you kind of generally do it. When I was doing the Out of the Abyss stream last fall, I spent hours or so prepping for the first session, and then by the end of it, I was like, just give me 10 minutes of rereading the section of where I think they're going to be, and that was about it. And my notes were basically like, go here, or this guy's going to show up.
Yeah.
And I'm blessed a little bit, and then I have a pretty decent memory, so I remember I did those recaps. Kind of, hey, if you missed the last session, here's what happened, and I ended up going on like 2-minute, 3-minute monologues. Like, there's this that happened.
I go too long with my recaps. I always do.
I do too. Yeah. But I know players and DMs who write those up specifically. Like that's their prep, is they kind of get in the headspace of the game by writing a page-long, synopsis of campaign so far. And they use that as like a little bit of a sheet. I've seen Chris Perkins will print that out sometimes in the printers near here and be like, all right, here's his character, his session sheet, and he's got like some NPCs and stuff on there that he knows that people are going to get in touch with, and has a quick paragraph recapping the previous thing. And I think that can be a really good headspace for some people, is to concentrate on that recap to get you into the mood of the game.
Yeah. No, man, I'm so lucky that my Friday game has a player that takes notes and then is willing to read them at the beginning, because otherwise, like, when I do my recaps, I'm like, so this is what happened, and this is how your character felt about it, and this is a little bit of the thing, and people are like, all right, we get it, let's just go.
Yeah. My favorite was when I had a player who she took meticulous notes, and also did, like, she was an artist, so she did like drawings of some things, and I'd be doing that. Sometimes it'd be like a few weeks in between games, because this was a lunchtime campaign at work, and so my recaps would be pretty short. I'd be like, I think this is what's happening. No, wait, yeah, this is it. And then she'd be like, no, that's not what happened. There's this, and this. I'm like, oh yeah, right. Okay, thank you. You're awesome. You have a visual aid for that scene. Good. Okay, now I remember.
When I was for my Friday campaign, when I was writing, I started writing a campaign journal about it, mostly because I'd done so many changes to this adventure that I wanted to document them for other people to read on the Paizo forums. And the only way that I would remember what actually happened session to session was the fact that I had a player that kept notes of all, like, I can look back and I'm like, oh yes, that's what happened. I remember that now. And then I'm into it. But it's like he has notes of all. We've played like 55 sessions so far, and he's got notes of all of them. And I'm so grateful for it.
Nice.
So I do want to actually kind of switch gears a little bit, because as you guys know, I know you've been sitting next to, well, yes, Greg on this side, but also a picture on this, you've been sitting next to this image here, and we've been talking about it on Twitter. We do have a really cool thing that Wizards has been nice enough to hook us up with. We are going to be giving away a brand new copy of the Storm King's Thunder Adventure Path. It's enough to make you, well, you should be freaking out if you're in chat. So here's, as we get started, I'm putting some music on. Here's what you guys have to know. The first thing is, in order to win you have to be following the channel because that's what Ankbot does. He will only reward our generous followers. So if you have not done that, please hit that follow button, get it in now, and you will be eligible to win. You cannot win if you are in fact Chris Perkins, because that was a legal thing that I had to say. If you're Chris Perkins, you're not eligible. And you have to be in chat right now. So I am going to start this thing right away, giveaway. Here's what's gonna happen. When I get this started, all you have to do is type !SKT, and that will allow you to put an entry in. When everyone gets their entries in, we will draw a winner, and we will announce who that is, and then I will get in touch with you in private, and we'll go over all the details.
You're gonna touch them in private?
Yes. Damon Hawk says, yes, this is the one day it pays to not be Chris Perkins.
Nice. I'm sure he's really excited about getting a copy of the manuscript that he wrote.
Yes. All right, so here is what you guys do. Right now, you can type in !SKT to join, and you will be rewarded in some way. So let me check this, make sure we're getting our entries in. We are. It is working. I've never used this giveaway feature before, so this is exciting.
This is awesome, though. I love this kind of automation. It reminds me of all the Excel spreadsheets that I used to make. So, good job. It's totally thematic.
Shadzar says Ashman doesn't even own a copy. Yes, I do. I said earlier that I have a copy. Don't say I don't. That's mean. No, I have a copy, and I have not opened or read it yet, aside from... I did read up to the flowchart, but then I stopped. Is it counting the caps too? Yes, it is, I believe. Let me check. Yes, it is counting the capitals. So... we'll just do that for a second. We'll let that run, and while that's going on, I wanna say I do want to kind of give we'll kind of turn away from that for a second. Let people get their entries in. I want to give a big thanks to Mr. Greg Tito for hanging out with me today. Just chilling and talking about D&D stuff. So thank you for coming by, man. Broadcasting all the way from the Wizards studio. This is actually the first time I have managed to sort of to worm my way into Wizards actual, it's
yeah.
I'm
by
slowly
extension, I feel like you're here with us in this conference room, feeling all of the love of the Wizards of the Coast team beaming directly to you in Long Island.
Yes. It's I'm hoping at some point, like I definitely, because there's a lot of places on the West Coast that I want to get to, but I do eventually want to visit like the actual D&D, because why not? I want to visit, Wizards' place of business. But also, I also, like, if you guys, I may actually see some of the people there at Gen Con this year, because I'm trying to organize my, to get out and do that. I think Wizards at Gen Con, right? Or are you guys at PAX East?
We haven't announced our I think what we're doing for next year as far as conventions go. But I know Origins in Ohio we're definitely going to be at. That's one of the ones we've have on the slate. So yeah, that should be really really exciting. I think we like that convention. They have the Origins Awards there as well, as have a lot of tabletop business people for it. So we're going to totally do that this year. But thank you so much for having me on, man. And I look forward to seeing you no matter what. And you should make your way out to Seattle at least once. It is a great city. It's not as good as New York, but it feels a lot more metropolitan than North Carolina did. That's for sure. But it is a sweet place if you like rainy, not necessarily rainy, but if you like misty, cold days. It is right in your wheelhouse, and the culture is really cool. In other places of the world where I've been like, I'm into Dungeons and Dragons, they're like, what's that? Or really? But here I say something like that, and they're like, oh, what campaign are you playing? Are you in so and so's? Or are you in so and so's? I'm like, oh, I haven't even met those people yet. So it's definitely much more of a tabletop gaming focus out here, in addition to having a lot of tech companies and stuff. So Seattle's where it's at. You should come and visit.
Yeah, awesome. And why don't you just real quick let everyone know like where they can kind of find what you do on the internet and where they can hit you up if they're interested in talking more, that kind of thing. I mean, the information is down there, but again, we want to see if you get it right.
It's always good to say it out loud, right? Yeah. So you can find me on Twitter. I'm at Greg Tito. Pretty easy. GregTito. And you can always ask me any questions you want about D&D or dungeon mastering there. I am open to all kinds of fun stuff. And of course, you can also follow the official Wizards Twitter account, Wizards_DND, DN, the letter N, the letter ND, because ampersands don't work apparently in Twitter, which I think is BS. And, while they're fixing all of their, changing it up to multiple, not 140 characters, they should totally add ampersand support.
It really is a branding
usernames. Yeah, I know. For us especially. I mean, it's not like it's a it's a big deal or anything. But then I also host the Dragon Talk podcast. You can find that on iTunes or wherever you get or in the link below, wherever you get your podcasts. Me and Shelly Mazanoble and sometimes Trevor Kidd talk to a wide range of folks, people who work on Dungeons & Dragons here in the office, as well as creators at other companies, and dare I say famous people who play Dungeons & Dragons. We talked to Rainn Wilson from The Office last year, and I have a few other musicians coming in very soon from bands that you might have even heard about who play Dungeons & Dragons. So I'm excited about that. And it's just blowing up. It's everywhere, man. So I'm excited for you guys to find us and learn more. There's a lot going on.
You'll probably get in touch with them before I do, but there was a list that came out of celebrities that played D&D, and one of them I heard about was The Rock, and I'm like, that's my goal. I'm getting him on. I'm finding a way to get The Rock on the show.
You can do it.
I believe in myself. So
and if you do, keep these emails.
I actually, that's what I said to when Matt Mercer was on, because someone asked me when Matt was on the show, they were like, oh, is that a thing off your bucket list? And I'm like, yes, the only thing I have left to do is go skydiving with Mark Hamill. And then I asked Matt, I'm like, you don't know Mark Hamill, do you? And he's like, no, I wish I did. I met him, I passed him in a hallway once. But I'm like, oh, well, if you ever meet him, tell him where I have an appointment with him to go skydiving. All right, let's make sure.
Mark Hamill snubbed me.
Oh, did he?
Mark Hamill snubbed me in an interview once. Like, I went to this specific event because they were like, oh, you got a chance to interview Mark Hamill. It was at San Diego Comic-Con, and he was doing voiceover for when that was being promoted. And I was like, sure, I'll go to that event. I want to meet Mark Hamill. I don't care about that game. Yeah. And he never showed up. And so all of us were like,
San Diego Comic-Con?
But he went to the show. He went to the panel he wanted to go, but he never came to the press event area where we were. I blame the fact that he's actually the Joker in his in his demeanor. That's probably what it was.
If he's at New York City Comic-Con this year, which is in like 2 weeks, I will make sure to corner him and tell him that that's not cool. And also,
who will be at?
What's up?
You know who will be at the New York City Comic-Con is Bob Salvatore. He is going to have a pretty big presence in the Wordfire booth. You may know him as R.A. Salvatore. Sorry, I call him Bob just because he's has an outrageous Boston accent. So I always say, hey, Bob. He is awesome, and he is the writer of all of the Legend of Drizzt books. So creator of Drizzt Do'Urden, Drow Elf extraordinaire. So go ahead and meet him if you're in the New York Comic-Con area. You have a badge. He's a great guy to talk to, and you'll be completely amazed if you've never seen him before that he basically is built like a bouncer. He's like this huge brick house of a man. I don't know about you, but when I saw R.A. Salvatore on book titles, in bookstores, I always just assumed it was this like, thin Italian man who was writing these books. But no, he's a shithouse, brick shithouse.
I will definitely make sure to get around to see him. I'm gonna be at Comic-Con for a little while. I'm going to be going around and seeing some people, maybe doing a little bit of press stuff. So I will see if I can see him. But we are coming up on the end of the show, and before we do, I want to do this giveaway. So everyone has got your entries in.
Good.
Thank you, everyone. We're going to hit that pick a winner button. And stop entries. Pick a winner. And it looks like our winner is Damn It Hawk.
I can only
are the brand new You are the brand new winner of a hard copy of Storm King's Thunder, as well as some other Dungeons and Dragons swag. So congratulations on winning that. And as always, thank you everyone for hanging out with us. Thank you everyone for constantly supporting the show, all of you, and I appreciate it a ton. As always, we're just gonna kind of segue out of things a little bit, but real quick, I do want to remind people that this show is made possible partially by the support of some of our generous patrons. We have some awesome people on Patreon that are helping us fund the show, and if you want to support more great content, more talk shows, more D&D, you can consider following that Patreon link and supporting us, or just talking about us to your friends on Twitter, or just, anything like that. Always come by and say hi. My name is Askren on Twitter, and you can talk to me about that. And Damn It Hawk says, this is the best day. Yes, well, that's what we're all about here. Is we are about making dreams come true. So I will get in touch with you about that. About receiving that book, and we'll kind of make that happen for you. Big thanks to my friend and guest, Mr. Greg Tito, for hanging out with me. It's been a blast. I had a great time talking, and I hope you did too. Signed in as
it was
the
fun.
Wizards account.
Good times. I know. I was like, hey, good job. And I'm like, oh wait, that's me. That's you know what's happening.
Yeah.
This is the first time because I didn't want to screw up the video, so now I'm actually looking at myself, which is odd, and I don't want to do it anymore. Thank
you to everyone for hanging out. Thank you to all of our followers and everyone who joined us, and thank you to everyone who came by and entered our contest. You guys are awesome. If you want more D&D content, as always, Sundays we have Jade Regent playing on the Exploding Dice channel. It's right down in the corner. As well as tomorrow, I'm going to be playing in Storm King's Thunder on the Encounter Roleplay channel. It's a great time with some great role players, and I am going to have a blast. But before we go, I am going to do something that I always forget to do, and I'm not going to forget to do it this time. I'm going to go to the D&D page right now to see who's online playing D&D, and see if we've got anyone cool. Who do we want to hit up today?
Oh man, you already set it up for. Oh, you're gonna be like, hey, everyone, go over there.
Yeah, we're gonna go to Nerd Immersion. That's where we're gonna go. So let me
immerse those nerds.
Yes. So here's what's gonna happen, guys. If you are not familiar with the way we do things, I'm gonna type /raid nerd immersion. And you guys are going to hit up that link. It's right in chat. And you're going to type in #Exploding Dice Raid. Let them know that you are coming from here. And show them your love. The Nerd Immersion is cool people. And I am good friends with them. So check those people out. Hit them up. Raid them. Tell them I sent you. But for all of us here, we're going to be signing out. Thanks again to Greg. Thanks to all the people hanging out with us. And as always, don't let Dice Thulu get his tentacles on you, because, he gets handsy when he does. We'll see you guys all later. We'll catch you guys.
See you guys later.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.